So there's an analogy where as the visionary, and the integrator, it's the kite and the string, right? Yeah. So the kite without the string, the visionary is gone.
Yeah.
It's in the clouds. But then the string without the kite just lays flat.
Flop around.
You've got to have that that healthy tension between visionary and integrator. And so that's why I was saying, I probably would get on the integrator's nerves.
Yeah.
But that's a good sign that there's that healthy tension that we could balance each other.
You are listening to The Anatomy of a Startup, a Wellbeing Coffee production. Enjoy.
So we're on episode 4. This episode is about knowing your strengths. As I recall, you were like Miss Las Vegas or something?
Miss Fitness Las Vegas.
Excuse me. Miss Fitness. So you know something about knowing your strengths.
Well,
I mean, maybe it was a different type of strength.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Miss Las Vegas sounds like it was a pageant. This is like a buff chicks pageant because we had to do, it was kind of a pageant, but I never really wanted to recognize it that way. It was more of a physical fitness, almost like bodybuilding, but not so scary.
Right.
And then there was a physical routine. But yes, I won Miss Fitness Las Vegas in 2003.
Did you live in Las Vegas?
No, I lived in Atlanta, but
you can still be Miss Fitness Las Vegas.
You can, and I was.
If you live in it, great.
Well, there were competitions all over the states, and that one sounded like the most fun. I had never been to Vegas. So now I've probably been like 12 times.
Right.
But yes, Miss Fitness Las Vegas. And then Miss Fitness USA for 2004. But what's funny about that is only the top 15 that placed in the nation got on ESPN. I got 15th, so it looked like I got dead last. It was great.
That is great. Did you have, were you trying to do, did you like, so you were in Atlanta and you heard that this was happening 3,000 miles away and you were like, I'm gonna go do that.
Well, I looked through the Miss Fitness platform at all the different, they didn't have one in Atlanta when I was ready to compete.
Okay.
And so I'm sure they have one sometime throughout the year.
Sure.
But Vegas, you can pick any of them. The whole goal was to go to nationals and you have to qualify by winning one of the regionals.
Right.
So I wanted to win in Vegas. And
this is good because I think, to get a goal, to achieve a goal that large, you do have to have a vision for what you're, what you have to imagine yourself being on the 15th place of the podium and then get there.
Yes.
And you did.
I did score, looked like last place.
No, you definitely fall into that visionary type category. And I think most successful entrepreneurs do. They kind of see the vision of what they want their company to be. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't know how to get there. And I think most successful entrepreneurs, tend to be that visionary type. But I do suspect that about equally as many entrepreneurs or visionaries go into it, kind of get their head in the clouds, and then things fall apart and they fail.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So where's the dividing line? What separates the entrepreneur, the two visionary types, one who is on the path to success and one that is not? Is it a bunch of different types of things? Maybe could you generalize it and say it's this, mainly this? So,
first starting this, I had no idea what a visionary was versus an integrator or any of these terms. I just had an idea and wanted to do it, so I kind of went after it. And after the fact, I learned more of how entrepreneurs are wired, the difference between the visionary and the, all the different things that you could be as an owner. And at first, I felt like I was an entrepreneur that kind of hid my hot mess because always late, scattered, but I have all these grand ideas, right? And then I have the motivation to do them.
Yeah.
But being so scattered, it always made me second guess myself as an entrepreneur because how could I hold it all together? Which is why I thought I needed to create a team around me.
Yep.
Because I know where my strengths are, but I know there's a lot of weaknesses as well.
Yeah.
So yes, I knew I had ideas, but again, I didn't know what all those terms meant. And now going through EOS, which we'll talk more about, there's something called a visionary. The person who heads the company, who has all the ideas, but has a hard time implementing them well.
Yeah.
And so once I learned my strength as a visionary, first, it allowed me to give myself grace, that it's okay to have these weaknesses, but then putting a team around you to fill those weaknesses with their strengths.
Yeah, I think that you're right that the team aspect of it is probably one of the, like if you're a visionary entrepreneur type who strikes out on their own and is like trying to tackle the world by themselves, I think that's where you start to kind of crash and burn really quickly. And I think most people realize they need a team pretty early on, and they can't do it themselves. But even then, you only have so much cash when you start a business, and you got to find that team quick and get that right pretty quickly, because you can't afford to just try to like get this off the ground at the same time as hiring employees that work and then don't, and then they fight, and you have to find somebody else.
Well, it's a fine balance, because in the beginning I couldn't afford to hire many. Like I was doing with the office coffee, I was packaging the coffee, grinding it, heat sealing it, I was delivering it, I was taking orders, I was invoicing, I was doing sales, I was doing every single part of it. And I could do it, but the sales I loved, but everything else wore me out. And so in the beginning, I had to have enough money in order to hire someone. So it's a fine balance of when you're at that point, and then when you need to offload the things that wear you out the most. And that's what I realized, hiring you and then hiring Kevin next, those, you would help with packaging coffee and delivery. That freed up more time for me to go out and sell. But then I was still doing QuickBooks and still doing, the website and all this admin, which I am terrible at. So when we found Kevin, it took a lot of that off my plate. And then the company, that's when it really took off. Yeah.
Well, I think I have that in my notes here, but, and then Ashley, I think, was kind of the last core part of that. That's when we had me and Kevin and Ashley, and I was going to say too, I think, I think that was one of the bigger parts that I think was almost pure luck in our success story. Obviously there's luck here and there, and there's skill here and there, but the fact that me and Kevin and Ashley worked out so well so early is great. And that you didn't have to rotate and burn through people until you found the right one. I worked out immediately, Kevin worked out immediately, Ashley worked out immediately, and these were the first three people you tried to hire. Well, after the kiosk ended.
We had some...
Well, I remember we had some less than savory characters at the kiosk for sure.
Well, we had some less than perfect employees that we had as a driver that had ended in a really bad way before Ashley.
Oh, man, maybe my timeline's off. But anyway, me and Kevin and Ashley, we arrived pretty quickly on the scene.
Yeah.
And then that's when Ashley was killing it in the field.
Yes, she was. What's great is all of our strengths came together where there wasn't a weakness. We were able to handle sales and kind of the driving force pushing us forward. You handled a lot of the operations, all the coffee, and then Kevin with all the admin and the website, and then Ashley carrying out the deliveries and customer satisfaction. They loved her. Yeah. And we had everything covered. But it grew so fast because of that we had to start bringing in others. And I was spoiled because the four of us were like the dream team, the OGs. And
you're like, oh, it must be so easy to just find people. These people are great. And
then we realized through many trials and errors in hiring.
And there'll be another episode about hiring and firing and laying off, all the stuff that comes with finding employees. But
which is an important podcast.
Yes.
Such a big decision.
It deserves its own episode for sure.
Yes.
But so you were a visionary and you got a bunch of executors around you. I think that's kind of the way to think about it. And that really helped us grow really quickly.
Yeah.
So we worked really well together as a team. You had the visionary kind of mindset for where the company should go, and we were able to execute really well. But there was that missing component that we didn't know was missing until later, that integrator component that the EOS worldwide system that we used describes, where that person would take the visionary's ideas and kind of translate them into an operable path. We could do it at the time because we were so small.
We're small.
So we were able to do that. But I think what I realized was that early on, maybe John kind of functioned as an integrator, or he would reel you in when you kind of would get a little too crazy. And actually, I don't think you had much of a choice because he was bankrolling things at the time.
He was. It was his paycheck paying your salary. So,
yeah. But I mean, do you feel like he was a good sounding board in the early days?
And it was tough because on our marriage, I didn't want every time we talked it to be about business.
Right.
And so we would actually call meetings so we could separate our relationship from the business. But yes, he was the sounding board, and I would give him, all my ideas and thoughts. But the hard part is he didn't work in well-being day to day. So he didn't know what you and I saw. He didn't know the market, so when I would tell him things, he didn't really know how to compare it. So he's talking from someone who works in corporate America, and he's very risk adverse. And he's talking to me, and I thrive off risk.
Love risk.
I know. So it was really frustrating for me because if he didn't think something was a good idea, I didn't want to go against what my husband was saying or thinking, but I also knew in my gut that certain decisions were correct. And I respect John a lot because he allowed me to make those decisions.
And sometimes to make mistakes.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So, and he would do the same with helping interview. Like, it was definitely a team decision in the beginning, but it got to a point where we grew so large operationally that I didn't want to stress John out with these questions,
right,
because they were so outside of what he could understand in corporate America that it really scared me, to be honest, to talk to him, because I didn't want him to worry or lose sleep. And that's actually when I joined EO. So entrepreneurial organization, EO's been a really big part of my development because I needed the sounding board of people who understand business. And joining EO and having my monthly forum, I have that where I didn't have to stress John out. And then John respected their guidance rather than me coming to him with an idea and he's like, I don't know about this, it's just, that's a spousal thing. But when I say my forum has advised me this way, and even if it's what I wanted to do, if they advised me that way, and he was on board.
Yeah.
So that really helped. But yeah, when we did EOS, we realized we don't have this integrator role, and it's too big now for me to do visionary and integration.
Right.
And
or
so,
maybe we'd have 15 employees and you'd be like, all right, let's implement this. But to filter that, it's not clean to be like, okay, we're going to implement this idea,
right,
and then have 15 people latch onto it simultaneously.
Exactly.
We could when it was, again, me, Kevin, and Ashley. It's not hard to figure out how you split that task up or
right,
how it affects things in the day-to-day, but it didn't really work well.
It did not work well because you can only manage so many people. So you guys were my direct, who I managed, and then you guys managed the other employees. And so if it's my vision, I need to correctly get it to you guys so you guys can get it to the next. And
right,
that's what an integrator does.
Yeah.
I just didn't have the mental real estate to do all of that.
Yeah.
So we definitely were missing that piece. And prior to the acquisition, we were looking for someone to take on this role. It's not a small paid salary. It's a big time, almost business manager.
It's hard to find, I think, that combination of, right, because if we say that some people are visionaries and some people are executors, it's a rare person that's does both at least well,
right,
so that they can kind of synchronize the two. Yeah,
right.
It was hard to find that role.
Which is why I'm very thankful the acquisition happened when it did, and we were able to go from 17 employees down to 3, because that was a big need. So if we were going to continue and not be acquired, that was hands down the next move, which would have been a really big decision on who to hire, because they would be managing the whole business.
Right.
That's like my baby.
Yeah.
But it was definitely needed.
Yep. As for other employees, I guess we can talk about that a little bit now. It's separate from the the hiring episode. But what were you looking for when you did hire employees at the time? And then, since we know that maybe you aren't the best at that, what did you learn? What have you learned from that, or what should you have been looking for?
Right. So, I laugh and say I'm terrible at it, but that's because when I meet people, I see the best in them. I want to see the good, but sometimes that blocks me from seeing the bad or asking the hard questions. I want people to feel comfortable and have a relationship, but then I miss out on asking the hard questions.
Right.
I did definitely get lucky with many hires, but I got some wrong as well. I think the number one thing I could pin on the best employees that I hired was humility. The employees that could show that they can work hard, but they have the humility to take criticism, to work on things they can get better at, and not be the know-it-all, because I'm the know-it-all.
Oh.
No, it's just like I need people who are coachable, because I'm very direct, because I want what's good for them and me, and there's no reason to like sugarcoat things or dance around
Right.
things. So, but I need people who are easily coachable. And if someone came in, with a lot of energy or funny personality, but were humble and coachable, they spot on, like, we're going to be the next well-being employee. I think one thing I found is a lot of people I interviewed who were newly out of college degree, the whole millennials, when we hired them, for whatever reason, and no judgment to millennials, but they seemed a lot more entitled and didn't work the same way those who didn't have a college degree, who came more from like a labor background. It was just a very different employee. And for me, I went to 4 colleges. Like, I had to put myself through school. So I graduated just shy of 26. But I hustled, and I knew how to hustle. And so college degree, I didn't care.
Yeah.
Not for this industry. I wanted someone who's going to work hard, have a good personality, and have fun.
Yeah.
But humility is big.
Well, and I think with that, I think a lot of industries are starting to see that college degrees don't do a lot. Even industries you might think that, like, oh, you definitely need a degree. Like, the tech sector is just not that interested in your college degree anymore. They want to see projects you've built or
Right.
coded. They want to see websites you've made. What have you done? And that's
Yes.
kind of, I think, where a lot of like HR, is looking for new ways to find people that aren't so degree oriented.
Right.
And mainly too because people can't afford to go get degrees anymore.
Yeah.
And I think
That's true.
I think that's part of our company that's why we did well a little bit, because we had all these people who didn't have experience, didn't have any formal educational training or background, but did work hard.
Right.
And actually, I think that since we didn't have people that had worked in the OCS industry before,
Yes.
that was good. It wasn't a bad thing that they didn't have experience. It was like, let's just
Fresh,
let's take a
clean
new
slate.
yep, put a fresh pair of eyes on it, and we were able to like set the standard for service in our
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
People wanted to provide service as good as we did. So
Just innovate in general in
Yeah.
the office coffee industry.
Yep.
Yeah.
It allowed us to not have coming in with any baggage.
Right.
So thinking back at the time when it was just, me and Kevin and Ashley and maybe a couple of coffee packers, because our team was so small back at that time, do you feel like it was easier to make changes when you wanted to try to make them before we had that visionary role? The integrator role, or communicate? Yeah,
absolutely. Just because we were all so close. We were working out of my upstairs. You guys were in my home. We worked day in and day out together. And so we just functioned as one team. So if I had an idea, as long as you guys were somewhat on board, then we would go with it. And even if you guys all weren't bought in, if I was bought in and could paint the picture, you guys bought in, and then we worked as a team. As it got bigger, it was really hard to share that same vision and excitement with y'all's employees, because I wasn't directly managing them, and my ability as a visionary is to get people excited about an idea, where you guys have different strengths, and so
Right.
it just didn't go down the chain like it should have. But yeah, I think we could implement things really quick and be very nimble when it was just us 4.
Yeah. And like you said, it did get complicated there at the end. When we had, somewhere between 10 and 20 employees, kind of fluctuated there at the end.
Right.
As we got salespeople and then didn't have salespeople. But we were looking for that implementer role at that point. I think, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. things were I want to give a good example about what was complicated about not having an integrator and like break down an actual like way that it failed. So maybe
Okay.
I'm thinking maybe markets is a good way to talk about this.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think that was right. So micro markets, I don't know if we've talked about this on the pod. So tell us about micro markets first
Okay.
of all. Yeah, let's do that.
So where we had gotten into pantry, so snacks and drinks,
Yep.
where the employer paid for them, where the employee can have them for free. Markets is the opposite. It's a micro market. It's a self-serve convenience store within an office building.
Yeah.
So you see them at the airport where you can go and grab something, you ring it up, pay, and you can go.
Sure.
So that's a micro market. Very different because the employee pays versus the employer. I was super hesitant about getting into markets because that's just a whole different business. It's vending basically, and I thought there'd be a lot more risk and so on. So yeah, it was a really big decision. But after we lost a couple of big contracts because we wouldn't do a market,
Yeah.
I said we need to get in and try this.
Yeah.
Looking back, I don't think I would do it again because it was so different that it really distracted us.
Yeah.
But then how do you know until you try?
Yeah.
And like with pantry, everyone said it would distract me and it worked out great. Markets, not so much. But yeah, it was one of those things you guys weren't really on board.
Well, and see, this is my working thesis as I'm sitting here thinking about it, is that I don't know it was so much, like I don't think there was anything drastically different in bringing on pantry versus bringing on markets. I think we were smaller and more nimble at the time that we were able to bring on pantry
Interesting.
snacks and stuff, and that we were kind of big and unwieldy when we tried to bring on markets.
Right.
And I don't wonder how
That's a good point.
how much more we might have been successful in markets had we had that integrator role at the time. You say, hey, integrator,
You're right.
I want to do this. I don't want to figure out how to do it. I just know that we need to because we need to land these big accounts. Work
Right.
this into the company for me. And I think if we had had that role, that our markets platform might have been a lot more successful.
I think it could have been, but then also with markets, we had to go to many of the markets daily or several times a week, where our pantry accounts, a lot of them we could go to once a week or every 2 weeks. And, I just felt like there was so much more upkeep with markets. And there's, generally with pantry, you'll have 4 times the purchases of what you'll have for a market because the employer's paying. So overall, pantry just made more sense, but I had to get into markets. And I'm really glad I did, in a sense, because it really connected us with NAMA, with our industry. We met some incredible people that way. We got some great contracts because of it.
Yep.
It was a really big decision, and you're right. We weren't quite as nimble, and it was really hard. But I don't know. It's kind of like...
Yeah, and I think
hard to know.
we're still kind of thinking through that. We're not too far out of the acquisition, right? We're only a few months out of it, so
Right.
thinking through what happened and how everything went down. But yeah, it definitely is hard at any point, as big as we were, to just tack on some whole new thing.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not you have that integrator role.
But I was the yes woman, right?
Yeah.
If I'd go to a sales
Yep.
appointment, they're like, can you do this? And I'm like, uh-huh. And they're like, do you do this? I'm like, I do now. Chad, Kevin, Ashley. You guys would kill me.
Yeah. I think,
Sorry.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of sleep.
some blood.
And literally some blood. That's a different story for a different
Yeah,
time.
you're a trooper.
Let's say we had found that role. We were able to put somebody in that integrator position, and let's say that we had the foresight to do that, 6 months prior to you thinking about selling off the routes. Do you think you would have tried to keep going? Was that really the linchpin in your decision to sell? Do you think we
Right.
would have been successful, or we could have grown to that next level if we had had the integrator position filled early on enough?
So we were at that point where it was an either or. It was either I get an integrator and we get organized and get better traction, or I need to sell. And I think I was at the point we were coming up to 7 years, and I was exhausted. And I think if I would have had an integrator maybe a year prior, before I got so exhausted, it would have been different because they could have run the business. And we tried that through some hires, and we tried to dabble into getting someone to carry out the operations. That didn't work, and I think that scared me to really put all my eggs in another basket of like, we're going to have this person run our business. And I was just so tired. So I knew ultimately I was going to grow the route business and sell it. And so I just felt like, and again, I wasn't trying to sell when the 3 companies came, but it just happened to work out, and it worked out so much better. I mean, we'll do a whole nother podcast on the way the acquisition went, and literally closing on the deal right before COVID, when I could be personally bankrupt right now with everything that happened. So that definitely needs to be its own episode. But I think, a year prior, integrator, we'd still be there. But I'm really happy we're not, because I'm ready for the next chapter. I'm ready. And that's a lot of entrepreneurs, like they build and sell. And that's just the way I'm wired, is innovate, create, implement, and then sell.
Yeah. If you had, what would have that person have looked like? Like what were, when you did look for that integrator role, what were you looking for? I mean, and I'm thinking generally here too, like those people who are that visionary type listening to this episode,
right?
What should they be looking for in that implementer role? What was hard for you that you got tired of because you're a visionary type, et cetera?
So I've learned a lot since starting the business of my strengths and weaknesses. I really didn't know them before. So everywhere I felt like I was weak in implementation as far as being organized, organized enough to have an idea, have it organized before I would implement it, where I would just have an idea and then speak and try to figure it out, which was very stressful for you guys.
Yes.
I didn't realize it. I just, I have an idea, let's do this. I think I would stress out any implementer, and that probably would be a good sign, because they would keep me reined in. But they would also take my ideas and put them into a practical sense of how to start and do it well, which would help protect the staff from feeling so overwhelmed. So what would they look like? So it's going to look like something different for every entrepreneur, but for me, I need somebody super organized, type A-ish, but a really good manager who could communicate effectively with the staff, and kind of like a project manager, you know. So that can be a lot of different personality types, but someone who can take my crazy yet good ideas and then implement them well. So I don't really know, just the opposite of me.
Well, and I think you don't want, I think at least bare minimum, you probably don't want a yes man. Like that's not what you're looking for.
No, because that's me.
But that's not what you need, right? Yeah, because if that's what you have, then it's going to just go as wrong as it did.
We'd both be in the clouds. So there's an analogy where, as the visionary, and the integrator, it's the kite and the string, right? So the kite without the string, the visionary, is gone. It's in the clouds. But then the string without the kite just lays flat.
Flop around.
You've got to have that. That healthy tension between visionary and integrator. And so that's why I was saying, like, I probably would get on the integrator's nerves. But that's a good sign that there's that healthy tension that we could balance each other.
If you're interviewing them, you probably don't want them just to nod at everything you say and agree with everything you say.
I need to be challenged, but respectfully.
Right.
And you do that for me. I mean, you and I are very different. I am the, I will say yes all day long, and I also think only about the positive, kind of like when I interview people. I see all the positive. But there's some negative stuff I don't think about, and you do, and the way this has worked is that you challenge me, but I know it's not just like griping, or like you really want me to think about it from this angle, and that's why I feel like we've had a lot of success too, because you're a little negative and I'm a little positive.
That's great. No, you need a little of both.
I know.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been great. We're looking forward to doing the hiring, firing, layoff, employee episode. That will probably be next. Don't quote me on that, but we definitely want to do that soon.
That's great. And also, I would love to hear from those listening. Is there a certain topic that they want to learn about?
Oh, sure.
Because, there are certain things that we think of, but as a new entrepreneur, like, what do you want to know? And we can create an episode on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks.
It's been fun.
Bye.